So one of the biggest fights of the year just concluded, and it basically set the tone for probably a trilogy, wouldn't you say?
I mean, without a doubt, you got two fights that are obviously both very close and competitive with multiple close competitive rounds. The first fight, I think a lot of people felt like Bivol won. I'm sure there's people that felt like Beterbiev won this fight. Um, and they're the two best light heavyweights, not just of their era, but maybe ever. And so it does sort of set the stage for potentially like an all-time trilogy. Now, when asked about it after the fight, Bivol seemed a little less interested in it than maybe I would have expected him to. But I hope that it's a third fight that happens because the first two have, I think, really warrant a third one.
What was your thoughts of the fight? Break it down. You're known for your fight assessments.
Well, I appreciate that, bro. So it felt to me like obviously the initial agenda for Bivol was stand his ground more. And I think that freed up Beterbiev to let his hands go more early in the fight. And I felt like Bivol was losing through the first half. There was a bunch of different ways you could have had that, but it felt like he won probably 2 rounds in the first 6 rounds. And then because he had stood his ground and when he let his hands go, he was throwing really hard. It was like he was losing, but Beterbiev had thrown more in the first 6 rounds and taken more damage in the first 6 rounds, probably than he took in the whole fight, in the whole first fight. And then once Bivol kind of went to the up on the toes thing, he started moving and Beterbiev just couldn't quite catch him. You know, he'd do that walk while you punch thing along the ropes, and then he'd sit down on one every once in a while. But he couldn't really hit Bivol down the stretch of this fight, except for the 12th round, which I do think Beterbiev won. But it felt like Bivol really separated himself in this fight in round 7 through 11 and took it clean, at least for me. But definitely, again, like you said, bro, it's a fight that deserves, a third go round. Muted, bub.
My takeaway, both fights I've had a draw. So I've just seen a dead even fight. I thought that this fight was going to start the way it did. I thought Beterbiev would be more confident and attack, and be aggressive. What I didn't see was Bivol having the fantastic second half, but it really comes down to these championship rounds. And that 12th round to me on my card, that was the telling round. And Beterbiev won it. I could see giving it to Bivol, but in both of these fights, these are literally draw fights to me. I mean, there's rounds where I think guys win clearly, but I think in total, there's more. The rounds that decide them are swing rounds, and those swing rounds are very close. And it just comes down to the style of work you favor, because in my opinion, the swing rounds in these fights are literally draw rounds.
And there probably were a few rounds that you could have called 10-10 in this one. But to me, it just, I don't know that I would say that I saw this as a draw. Obviously, I scored it for Bivol. I think that a draw is within like the realm of reality. But to me, it felt like I said, in 7 through 11, that Bivol's boxing skills and the fact that he was throwing hard combinations. I mean, bro, there was parts of that fight where he was pushing Beterbiev backwards, which we've never seen in his entire career. It felt like on almost every level in the second half of this fight that Bivol elevated his game, not just from the first fight, but from the first half of this fight. And for me, really separated himself, not by a lot, but just enough to get the job done.
So where does he stack? Like, I think the confusing thing is, even though Beterbiev won the first fight, I think a lot of people like you think Bivol won the first fight. So this loss really hurts Beterbiev because the first win really helped cement his legacy. Now I feel like because Bivol's won this fight, he's going to go down as the great light heavyweight of the era, because that first fight was so close and Beterbiev got it, but a lot of people disputed the outcome. Who do you think leaves as the great light heavyweight from this fight?
That's why you got to have a third one, bro. Because, again, you got 2 close fights with multiple swing rounds. I feel like Bivol has won both of them, but that's not what happened. And so I think the important thing now in terms of like the long-term legacy of both of these guys and like, the lineage of the division, they got to do it one more time. They may not be able to do it one more time immediately. I mean, how special would that be if they did? But they're going to have to do it one more time before they call it a day, I think.
If they do a trilogy and say Bivol or Beterbiev wins, are we looking at the greatest light heavyweight ever, the winner of this trilogy?
I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I mean, these are two
To
incredibly
me, that's
accomplished guys.
a no-brainer. To me, like, these are guys, 8-year world champions. They were 1 and 2 in the division, clearly above everyone else. They were so good, they made the division bad because they just knocked down all the contenders. So they made the division uninteresting. And Beterbiev just beat Callum Smith. We saw earlier on this card how good Callum Smith is for all those
Right, you
people.
want to talk about levels. He made that fight look easy.
He made that fight look like a mismatch to the point where people go, what's Callum Smith credibility, etc. And then you see him on that tier of the guy looking to get to that level. And like we were talking about, but Callum Smith has that ability of kind of being, it's a bad word sometimes to say a gatekeeper, but Callum Smith is a gatekeeper. You don't get to title fights through Callum Smith unless you're that guy.
I think he's just a contender. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
he's
that's
just
a
a
better
guy.
word.
He's just a guy that's gonna be in the mix, and if you're not the real deal, you're not beating him. I don't know if you want to segue into that fight, but just to give another thought about it.
Let's talk that fight.
I thought that, again, to some extent, it was a levels fight in the sense that Smith has taken a lot more punishment. He's had a lot more hard and meaningful fights than Buatsi. He's older. He's, the fight would better be if he really took some hard punishment. So in a lot of ways, it felt like everything in this fight was kind of leaning towards Buatsi, who did close the show very strong. But throughout the fight, Callum Smith really dished out a lot of punishment to Buatsi and kept the pace that, I wasn't entirely sure he could. And again, showed why he's like your classic sixth man in the division. Do I think that he's vulnerable, that he's too vulnerable in terms of body shots and what he can take in return to beat Benavidez or Bivol or Beterbiev? I do think that he's too vulnerable for those types of opponents. But anyone other than that, he's beating them, bub.
What did you learn about Buatsi and Smith in that fight?
Well, I learned that Smith has still got some juice left, and he's got the hunger and the desire, which is sometimes like a big part of it. We've always known he hits really hard. We've always known he's skilled. He's got good feet. He throws nice combinations, but does he still have that dog? And clearly he does. And I think he'll find himself in more interesting fights because of that. But Buatsi, it's like, everyone's been talking about the potential and what's the ceiling he can reach. And now it's almost a 10-year pro career where this is really the first world-class type of guy that he's taken. And his skill set for a 31-year-old Olympian just looked like a little less complete or a little more defensively vulnerable than I would have expected it to in a situation like this. But again, he's never been in a 12-round fight with a world-class guy.
And if we're talking facts, right? And we talk facts on this show.
Well, I do, bro.
I mean, it was a step up for Buatsi, and he's a very good fighter. And Callum Smith very capably is a top 5 light heavyweight. And we've never seen Buatsi fight a top 5 light heavyweight. So to me,
it's been a really slow development for him.
It's been a slow development. I think he's a talented fighter, but when it comes to fights, and this is something I believe, experience matters. Taking those fights matter. And I think that it's fine that he lost because now he has the experience of this level of a fight. But a lot of people wrote Callum Smith off because he was just, he's just a guy, all he does is punch. It's very formidable. And I think for Buatsi, he's going to get better from this fight as long as he can handle the loss in his head. But to me, this is like what Callum Smith does. We talk about it all the time. Great fighters reinvent themselves. You know, he was supposed to be the veteran that's used as fodder, and now magically he just stopped a guy who's undefeated Olympian in a step-up fight, and now he's back. He could fight Morrell. He could fight Benavidez. You know, he could take
to
a
me,
lot.
that's the fight, bro. The first one you said is Smith and Morrell. I just think that because I feel that Benavidez has earned his way, you know, to either Bivol or Beterbiev. Now, if they fight for a third time, it's, you know, he's going to have to find some sort of interim fight that he could take. And Callum Smith would be a great option, I think, in that situation. But to me, that's the fight I want to see. I want to see David Morrell in with Callum Smith. That's the kind of fight I think he would have benefited from prior to the Benavidez fight, to really get in, like you said, with a top 5 guy, and who's not quite as unbreakable and dangerous as Benavidez. But here's the thing, bro. If he catches anybody clean, like, he's gotten some of the freakiest knockouts that I've seen, you know, in 20 years plus in boxing. So he's a threat from bell to bell. I think that that's just another layer of what makes him a tough out. I think him and Morrell, or him and Vosdik, those are tremendous matchups.
For sure. Now let's transition to your guy, Kabayel. Love me some Kabayel. What did you think of him?
Bro, he's low-key one of the best heavyweights in the world. I don't give a fuck if anybody disagrees with me, to be honest. I mean, stop Big Bang with a body shot, completely out-hustled him, got clipped and hurt in the first round, got dropped in the second to last round, but just showing a volume, a variety, and a tempo that a lot of these heavyweights are just not going to be able to keep up with, bub.
It's kind of crazy, right? We talk about this sometimes on our show about how there's fighters who weren't supposed to be superstars or top fighters, and they get criminally underrated. Kabayel is a guy that I think fits that mold. He's a top 5 heavyweight. He weaponizes his pace. He knows who he is as a fighter. He beat Frank Sanchez, which is not easy to do. Follows that
Frank Sanchez.
But he stops Frank Sanchez, then he stops Big Bang Zhang. Both are really impressive things. And I saw a lot of people surprised that he even had this much success.
Dude, if you didn't know that that's how this fight was going to go, you don't know boxing. Because Big Bang, as much as he hits hard, as much as he's throws fast punches, he can't keep a tempo. And this guy keeps a tempo. So if you can't keep the tempo and you can't deal with a big, strong guy in your chest throwing 4 or 5 punch combinations that are unpredictable, you're not beating this guy. And I don't think there's going to be too many that can beat this guy. I think he's a real problem. The only type of guys that I think have any kind of chance against him are Usyk, Parker, Fury, the very best of the division. And outside of that, I think he's smoking everybody.
And he's one of them. And he's one of the very best, you know, and I think that's the thing is
what's he, the number 4 guy now? I mean, I think he's the number 4 heavyweight, arguably.
I think so.
5,
you know, I think so. What's the next fight you want to talk, Dakota?
Man, there was a lot of good ones. You know, the Shakur fight was what it was. He hurt his hand. Clearly, that's a recurring thing. But he still dominated the fight and got a stoppage. It was, to me, it was like kind of checked all the boxes. You know,
staying Shakur, what did you think of the Floyd Schofield stuff? Kind of weird. You know, I was on the road when it was happening, but apparently reports of him being sick. He's in the hospital. The commission wouldn't allow him to fight. Just kind of a strange buildup, I would say, because the whole buildup was built around kind of animosity and like bad trash talk on the internet. And then the payoff was the fight. And then they get there and then the fight's off. And I don't really know. Schofield really has to do something special in his next fight, because to me, this makes me lose a lot of interest in him because he was taking a big step up. He's out of the fight. I'm no longer interested in that fight because you run the risk of it happening again, because it has happened.
I guess I understand that perspective. Before we get to the fight more, though, why would you lose interest in Schofield if it's just, you know, human beings get sick, and when you're cutting weight,
because of the drama leading up to the fight, there was a lot of potty mouth. There was a lot of trash talk. The bout had a lot of social media to it.
Our favorite.
And then you don't get the fight. So now you wonder in your head, is the build up to his fights now going to be a lot of that stuff? And we have to wonder if he makes it to the fight or not. Because like you said,
the elephant in the room too is like the Pops is saying some pretty wild shit about Shakur and his team.
And we're not going to get into it because
I'm not getting into the specifics on that at all. The only reason I say it is to say that beyond just his son getting sick, they clearly feel that they've been wronged in some way. I don't know what that is, but there's stuff we don't know. Aside from all that, he didn't show up on fight night and Josh Padley did. And I want to give that guy a little credit because he was so out of his depth on this one, but he showed up ready to go and let his fucking hands go and put on about as good of a performance as a guy with no knockouts and no like world level fights could do. I was really impressed with the balls on that guy. And he made it like not that easy of a night for Shakur. I think Shakur wanted smooth sailing and he had to work for it a little bit.
I mean, for me, Shakur, it was a good performance, but I'm waiting for that Shakur hello world Tiger Woods just blows through a guy.
You're not going to get it. I don't think.
I know, but I thought in this fight you might get some,
I don't think you're going to get it.
BC weaponizing his skills, because when you watch Shakur, bro, what he does, he's up there to me with Marquez with being such a fundamentally perfect boxer.
Sure.
And I wish
he's Rigo, though. He's Rigo.
I wish he'd have a little Marquez Katsides in him, you know, and I thought this might be that fight where he could do some target practice and let his hands go. But to me, I'm impressed with his composure, but I was hoping for a more dominant, exciting performance. I can't lie.
With a guy like Shakur, what's going to make him exciting is exciting opponents. And as much as I just gave Padley his props for showing up and being a hell of a fighter, that's not the guy that's going to do that. When is Rigo exciting? Well, he's exciting when he has Nonito Donaire in front of him, who's putting great pressure on him, and it's forcing Rigondeaux to show the depth of his skill. That's what it's going to take for Shakur. He needs his Nonito Donaire to bring out the best in him, because ultimately what's going to make him exciting is when he schools a guy that's the best of the best, that nobody that, you know, if he goes out there and beats Tank 10-2, that's his star making thing. But he's not going to give us that highlight.
What's the next fight you want to talk about?
I mean, bro, we didn't talk about it that much. You know, we could talk a little bit about Parker and Bakole, because obviously that was a last minute replacement type fight. We got Ortiz and Madrimov too. I'm going to make sure we don't forget any of the big ones, but
let's go into Parker, because that to me was impressive. I get Bakole didn't have a full camp, but I mean, to knock out Bakole, this is a big, tough guy. Who cares if he had a camp or not? This just further says Parker's a capital G guy. I also want to say to my guy, I just want the truth. We hear Parker at Bakole doing, I can't even say what that word is.
Suavemente.
What does that mean?
Parker at Bakole doing the suavemente. It's a type of dance, you know what I mean? And when Bakole lost his legs, he hit that suavemente real quick.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was just, I was surprised that he did that, what he did to Bakole, because I thought Bakole stylistically was a tough matchup for Parker.
I remember you saying you thought he was going to stop him.
I thought he was going to stop him because it was just a bad matchup. And for him to do that, I mean, he might be the best heavyweight in the world currently.
He definitely deserves the Usyk fight. I think if anyone deserves it, it's him. It seems like Dubois will probably get it just because he's got a title. But I think you're right. I think he might be the best guy going. If he can't get the Usyk or the Dubois fight, him and Kabayel, obviously I know in terms of name that would be a step down for him, but that's one of the best, if not, you know, one of the three best fights in the heavyweight division right now would be him and Kabayel. I mean, but it was great, bro. He just boxed real smart. You know, he didn't give the kind of openings to Bakole that Jared did. And people forget, but Parker hits fucking hard. And even though, like in the Joe Joyce fight, the punishment Joyce took in that fight, he was never the same from after that. Like, he's the guy that didn't recover from that fight. I think a lot of that is because Joseph Parker is smart and he hits very, very hard. He's not a Wilder puncher, but he's a hell of a puncher.
It's also hand speed. I think guys get in there and they're not used to guys throwing hands in the heavyweight division with that much ferocity and that quick. And I think Parker's got some real hand speed, kind of up there with Andy Ruiz. Ruiz has that real hand speed that'll give guys nightmares because they just are not used to seeing it. I think one of the big things with Parker is just how much faster he was than Bakole.
Much faster, much better shape. There was a couple times where they were in clinches and he was able to push Bakole back. So it felt like that added, 20 pounds that he's got that's kind of new came in handy on this one. He's just really versatile too, man. There's not a lot of heavyweights that are versatile. Heavyweights tend to do a thing, and then it's that thing versus the other guy's thing. But Joe Parker, Kabayel, Usyk, the best heavyweights at this moment can do multiple things.
Yeah. Do we go to Vergil Ortiz now?
That was a great fight, bro. To me, that was a real flip a coin kind of a fight that it felt like Vergil just nicked in the last couple of rounds, but that was a good one, man. You got to give it up to Madrimov for fighting Terrence Crawford and Vergil Ortiz back-to-back in like a 6-month period. But listen, I thought Vergil looked kind of lost early in the fight, and it was really impressive how he just sort of slowly turned up the heat. And it was like before you knew it, it was uncomfortable from Madrimov, and Vergil was kind of off to the races by the 5th or 6th. Muted.
Vergil has that element where he's a pressure guy. His world-class trait, he has boxing ability, but he loves putting pressure on people. That's what brings him to the rodeo.
He's great at it.
He's great at it. Madrimov was able to outwork him early, outbox him, but I saw a great boxer or a great mover in Madrimov who had no plan B, and I saw a great puncher who had no plan B in Vergil Ortiz. And it was better to be the puncher on this night because you could dictate the tempo of the fight. And the second half of the fight was completely dictated by Vergil Ortiz.
Well, and beyond being a puncher, too, it's like it's that thing that Keyshawn did with Baranchik. It's like when you're in a weird fight like that, just being able to find little moments and making the most of them, those add up. So it's like, whereas in rounds 1 through 4, Madrimov is moving all over the place. It's like there's little body shots here and there. There's a little foot pressure that by the 7th, it's like Virgil's pushing him around. So it's capitalizing on little moments. I think that's a real skill on his part.
I mean, to me, Vergil's very elite. And I know a lot of people want to be like, oh, I see this. Look, hitting really hard and having a good motor is a world-class trait. And if he can keep this up, he's very, very special. If he was not special, he would not have won this fight.
I think Madrimov is special, to be honest with you. I mean, he has a very unique style. He's going to be a handful on any given night for anybody. So I think that they're both special. And I think that, at the moment, Vergil, he's fighting killers right now, bro. He's really in that part of his career where he's defining his legacy.
He's taking good fights, bro. He's taking good fights. He's showing a willingness to want fights. Like he took Surai Boachuk on and he goes straight into Madrimov.
That's tough, bro.
You have to respect that. You have to respect that because he could take other fights, but you can tell he wants real fights.
Listen, we talk about, some of the young fighters that can be a little embarrassing. Like Vergil's not that embarrassing for comparatively.
I don't think he's embarrassing. I think I think he's pretty.
Yeah, I think that he's one of the best fighters we have right now, and I think with a win like that with Boachuk, those wins back to back, he's not there, but I think he's starting to move into the pound for pound conversation, and he's definitely in the top 3 at this weight right now. I mean, if Crawford were to stay at this weight, that's who I'd want to see him fight.
So, summing up the card, and then there's one other one we have to talk about. We almost forgot. Carlos Adames-Hamzah Sheeraz. What do you think of that, Dakota?
That was a weird one. Hamzah was just kind of passive, and they said in the telecast that it looked like he broke one of his hands somewhere in the mid portion of the fight, which makes sense, because he did have just sort of a concerned and passive look on his face. It looked like he was getting through it to some extent, but I still felt like he won some rounds, and I actually scored it 6-6, and I wasn't mad at the decision. So, not the type of performance you're looking for from Hamzah. But he also fought through a broken hand and clearly won the last 2 rounds, which ultimately got him a draw.
No, I get you. It's just, to me, I saw Hamzah as a superstar type fighter. Adames is a very good fighter. We're probably underrating how good he is, but this was supposed to be Shiraz's moment. And quite honestly, he just didn't have a performance that I think all of us were expecting, because I think a lot of us were expecting him to potentially be a breakout superstar in the division.
We were expecting to see the combinations that we've seen so many times from him, the punching power, the explosiveness, and he just fought very careful, against Adames, who, when he would get close, would take advantage of it. He would capitalize on those moments. But yeah, it was not a star-making performance from Hamzah, but it wasn't a loss, and hopefully there's some lessons in there for him. Looks like we lost Lukey for a sec.
No, you didn't lose me. My
Maybe
phone
there
is.
it is.
Yeah, there I am. I don't know. I found it to be disappointing, right? Because middleweight's pretty bad right now, the division. And Hamzat was one of the guys where, like, okay, this might be a guy who breaks out and does something. And it was kind of like the Janabek Denzel Bentley fight for me.
Yep.
Where it's like you have a very talented, exciting fighter who now showed us he has a huge flaw on some nights. And as much as I like Janabek, and as much as his resume states he could be a pound for pound fight, the Denzel Bentley fight was not good. And that fight lingers with hardcore fight fans. And I think Carlos Adames is a very good fighter, a world champion, etc., but he's never quite captured the imagination of fight fans. And this was really supposed to be Shiraz's moment, and he did not really have the performance we needed.
It's funny because middleweight, just multiple times, it's been a very disappointing division in the last couple of years. This was not just a disappointing performance for Hamzah, but I think overall a disappointing fight. And I'm smiling because I'm like, God damn, Lara is still the best middleweight. He really is still the guy.
Clearly, too. Pretty clearly.
It's not even really like a close second.
I think you favor Lara over anybody at this point.
Yeah.
And by the way, tons of people in the chat, leave comments. We love having you in here. Throw comments in there. I think that wraps up the Riyadh season card.
Yeah, I think it does. Hell of a card, man. Hope we get to see Bivol and Beterbiev 3 sooner than later. One thing I would love to throw to you, bro. How do you think let's say Bivol takes other fights, right? I think the obvious ones are Canelo and Benavidez. How would you see Bivol and Benavidez? I love that matchup.
I don't know. I got to think about it, because we're fresh off a great fight, and they both had 2 good fights this month. I don't know. I have to think about it, because it really feels like in those real fights, when you get the top guys, what day is it? Saturday, Monday, Tuesday? And I'm joking when I say that, but I mean, it's like on Tuesday, Benavidez wins. On Thursday, Bivol wins. That's how close it is.
It could come down to who got better sleep.
Yeah, it's like pick the day, flip a coin. That's who wins the fight. That's how good it is.
How about Beterbiev and Morel? That's a hell of a fight too.
I think that's pretty similar. My only concern is Beterbiev's age. At some point, you can't fight like a prime prize fighter at 40.
But we're not at that point yet. I didn't think he won the fight, but I don't see any. I don't
either. But I'm just saying, like, with Beterbiev, we're holding him to a very unrealistic standard, where he's probably not even in his prime, and we're expecting him to take the most interesting fights of his career and to be the best version, when probably 7 years ago was the best Beterbiev.
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment he may not be in his prime, but he's almost as good as he's ever been. And 40-year-old guy, but these are the two most physical fights of his career by far. And so I don't think the punishment meter on him is real high yet.
No. Let's go to the Pro Box card. I know you watched it. Go on a rant. They're the main event. Gabe Flores Jr. won. I thought that he could have won. It was a bad fight. There was a lot of waiting. I think Gabe edged it because he had 2 knockdowns, and I think he won 2, maybe 3 other rounds, which gives him a advantage, but it just wasn't what you wanted to see from that fast start. I think anyone could agree with that because there was just a lot of waiting, and Arellano had kind of an ugly style. I was there live, so I couldn't discern what punches were landing and not landing. And then the co-feature at Cesar Francis, my man sees pretty bad stoppage with Emiliano Moreno landing a shot and then a weird stoppage, which kind of screwed both guys. Emiliano Moreno's a really hardworking, likable 19-year-old welterweight, and Seas is a really hardworking veteran who was winning a fight against a young kid, and the outcome got taken out of basically both of their hands. What did you see in those 2 fights?
Well, with the Flores Jr. fight, he got the knockdown in the first round, and then, like you said, there was just a lot of waiting. There was a lot of posing, maybe some overthinking, and I didn't feel like he won a round in rounds 2 through 6. I thought he lost 5 rounds straight. Got a nice rhythm going in 7 and 8, won those rounds. I think probably lost the 9th, then got another knockdown in the 10th, so I wound up scoring it a draw. But it didn't matter what I scored it because 2 of the judges saw 11 rounds or 9 rounds to 1 and 8 rounds to 2. So it's a little tough to, make a statement on a fight where the judges aren't watching the fight. I mean, it was a close fight, and they have literally 9 to 1. It didn't make any sense, but it's I'm not really sure what to make of the performance because there's good things in there. There's multiple like really impressive rounds, but over the course of a 10-round fight, he turns it on, he turns it off, and I think that's just where Gabe's at.
What about the Francis Moreno?
Fun fight. Obviously Francis won the early rounds, and then it felt like Moreno was starting to come on. He was hitting Francis a lot clean down the stretch. He tagged him
to the body was something I noticed live. Was like there was a little bit of a shift that Moreno was putting his physicality on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that should be noted. Is it felt like the fight was starting to turn.
It absolutely was starting to turn, but it was still very competitive. And so when Francis got caught off balance, but then immediately like had his hands up and was ready to throw and defending himself, and then the ref stopped it. It was really jarring and I think unadvised and unwarranted. And like you said, it takes away from both guys because Francis doesn't have the opportunity to fight back, and Moreno doesn't get the opportunity to get a more highlight reel, sensational type of stoppage. So that was an unfortunate way for that fight to end. So both fights, unfortunately, I think really highlighted by bad officiating, which I hate talking about, but it keeps coming back over and over again. So we're forced to.
I also would like to say, if you're a hardcore fight fan, go watch the Anthony Cuba versus DeMichael Harris fight. Absolutely awesome.
Great performance from Cuba.
It was a great performance by Cuba. And the 8th round might have been my favorite round of the year. Cuba tries to close the show, gets dropped, and then gets up and slugs it. I mean, so I thought it was a good card, the Pro Box card. I thought that all the fights were interesting. I just felt like, I love the California State Athletic Commission, but it wasn't a good night for them.
Nope, was not. They tripped on their own feet.
They tripped on their own feet. Okay, and then 360 Promotions had a card, but you don't really watch those shows. Cain Sandoval won, got a stoppage. Daniel Chucky Barrera, prospect, he lost. So loses undefeated record. Let's go into Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach. What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thoughts are who asked for this? And I think the answer is nobody. But at the end of the day, it's the fight we get. And thank God that Lamont Roach is a hell of a fighter and super competent and versatile and could do a bunch of different things because he's got nothing going in his favor. He's moving up in weight against one of the biggest punchers, if not the biggest puncher in boxing. I don't think either of them have fought in quite some time. And it's hard for me to imagine a world. I could see Lamont winning the first 6 rounds, but it's just hard for me to imagine a world where he's able to keep Tank Davis off of him for 36 minutes in the ring. And, you know, Shakur was the fight that we all really wanted to see from Tank. There's a lot of really exciting guys at lightweight right now, and he's not really taking any of them. He may be taking the best guy at 130 right now, but I feel conflicted about the matchup. You know what I mean?
So
that being said, the last point I'll make was I was interviewing Rihanna Rios the other day, and she's had the opportunity to train a lot with Lamont, and you know, I think aside from being a training partner of his, like really believes that he's got tricks up his sleeve and he's going to be able to surprise Tank, especially with them knowing each other in the gyms.
I think Lamont's going to win the fight. I think that
Really?
I think Gervonta's distracted. I think his focus isn't fully there for this fight. I think Lamont is a lot better than people think. He's more versatile than they think. And I think this is going to be a very, very, very hard fight for Gervonta Davis. And I think it's very cautionary when you're hearing Gervonta literally saying, I don't really like boxing. It was a way for me to make money. I want to retire soon because, you know, and it sounds like he wants to move on with his life. And it sounds like a guy that like could be in a hard fight because the passion might not fully be there. I think this is going to be a big upset.
I don't know if it'll be an upset, but at a minimum, when you feel that way about the game, it's like it could be like Jared Anderson's last fight, where even though the other guy is overmatched, it's like you're taking punishment you don't need to take just because you don't entirely want to be there.
Also want to get to my guy. Can you say his first name?
I can't. It's really small on this screen.
Vinika Singh. So
I'm gonna go with Vinayak.
Vinayak. Okay. He said.
You tell me if I'm right, buddy.
Yeah, tell us if we're right. But thank you for doing it. Thoughts on who is next for Usyk, Dubois, and Parker? So I will. Do you want me to throw out if I was matchmaker Lukey, my next 3?
Go for it.
So my next 3, for Usyk, I'd do Joe Parker. For Dubois, I'd do F.A. Ajagba. And there we go.
I think for Dubois, I would do Kabayel. That's really the fight that I want to see. I think Kabayel's earned a big fight. I don't see why he should have to wait online behind anybody at this point.
I mean, I like that fight too. I'm just thinking F.A. Ajagba's won a lot of hard fights and was supposed to fight Bakole and just maybe lost Bakole as an opponent. And Dubois was training for a fight. So maybe if there was a time where they could meet up soon, that would be a fight. But that's good. Do you think Shakur's performance was impressive or not? I found it to be a professional performance, but it didn't meet my exceptional standards for it blew me away.
I think it was impressive. He beat a good fighter with a broken hand and got a stoppage. Obviously, he's a pound for pound type of guy, so he gets held to a different standard, but he did what he was supposed to do with the guy in front of him, and when faced with challenges, he made it work.
Lamont Roach will not be easy. I do think he will lose, but he can make Gervonta go to a decision, in my opinion. If Lamont wins, the whole boxing world is going to be in shock. I mean, Gervonta might use his wanting to retire as a way to give the fans one last impressive performance before retiring. I think this is a real fight, man. I think it's a real fight, and I think people are sleeping on Lamont because he's lost a fight, and really no promoter since Golden Boy has gotten behind him to push him down your throat. But he's a guy who knows who he is. He has a great father who's a trainer, and he knows Tank, and he's kind of like what we always call a trap fight. He knows Tank pretty well. He's coming to win. And friggin' Tank has everything to lose because most fans are like, oh, he's going to knock this guy out.
Well, and I think there's also, too, there's got to be some level of like, you know, if you're Tank and you're looking at your own resume and at your career and you feel like now's a good time to stop when you haven't even really taken like one contemporary of your time outside of Ryan Garcia, You know, he's a little complacent, and if Lamont's just got a much more like hungry approach, it wouldn't be a bad thing for boxing for Lamont Roach to upset Tank Davis. I mean, a lot of we talk about it all the time. A lot of the stars of American boxing, young fighters, they're not active. They're not taking interesting fights. It's everyone else all over the world that's taking fights and making interesting fights. So it wouldn't be bad for the sport if Lamont Roach beat Tank Davis.
Our guy, Shoeshine Boxing, a great podcast that I highly recommend you guys subscribe to. He said Lamont is a good technician. Roberto Diaz knows. Salute, guys. Awesome card. Thank you, Shoeshine. Mr. Singh, to be frank, Gervonta has a good resume. Hector Garcia, Rolly Romero, Ryan Garcia, and Pitbull. I mean, I see that. It's just I think that at the same time, as a hardcore fight enthusiast, you want to see him with those unification fights with the other lightweight champions. And those fights just seemingly never have been made. Lomachenko in Lomachenko's prime, Shakur Stevenson currently. Like, we want to see those type of bouts, at least from my perspective.
Especially a couple years ago in lightweight, you know, when he was taking guys like Hector Luis Garcia, there was Teofimo, there was Ryan Garcia, there was Devin Haney, there was Shakur. There was a ton of, there's just been so much talent immediately around him. And he spent his whole career approaching his career like Floyd approached the end of his career and never really took anybody's top fight that they wanted from him. He never really gave anybody what they wanted. That doesn't mean he didn't beat anybody good. Frank Martin's a hell of a fighter, but I don't know if there's maybe there's one or two Hall of Famers on his resume. If I put him next to the Pacquiaos and the Mayweathers and the Canelos and the other legends, he don't even come close, bro.
It's one thing I can't take away from Ryan. He never ducks anyone, says Mr. Singh.
I mean, you're not wrong. He doesn't duck guys. I've given him credit for that.
Okay, I'm going to get into the undercard now of this brilliant fight card. We got Alberto Puello versus Sandor Martin, which I think could be for the best junior welterweight. What do you think of that?
That's a good fight. Haven't seen Martin fight since the Teofimo Lopez fight, but I think he definitely won that fight. It was a close fight, but I felt like he edged it. So between that and a win over Mikey Garcia, it feels like he should be getting credit as one of the best fighters in that division already.
I feel like Puello probably is the best junior welterweight, and no one is talking about it.
I've never been impressed by him, to be honest. I felt like Akhmedov beat him. He's never wowed me. It doesn't mean he's not good, but he's never really caught my eyes like, wow, that's a guy.
I think he's the guy, bro. That's my hot take. I think he's the guy, and I think this is going to be a pretty dominant win for him.
If you're right, you might not, he's certainly a top 5 guy if he beats this guy.
Jose Valenzuela versus Gary Antoine Russell. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm getting my Russells confused. What was Russell's last fight?
He's the guy that lost to Alberto Puello.
He lost to Puello, and then did he also have the fight with Postol with the weird stoppage?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a tough one to call, bro. That's a tough one to call. I can't pick that.
Yeah, because Valenzuela has the makings of a star. Fans are really behind him after the Pitbull win. But I don't know what to make of him against.
It seems like the momentum is with Rayo at the moment, especially in the last 2 years or so. Russell at his best is a really tricky guy, but momentum and experience does matter. So having the Bivol fight, or not Bivol, the Postol fight, and him having already fought at the world level multiple times, but I think in general I would have to lean towards Rayo. He's coming off a career best win, avenging a loss against Colbert. He's been sensational lately.
Yeah, I agree with you, bro. I don't know. Because I mean, if this were 2 fights ago, I would have thought Antoine Russell, no doubt. And now it's not 2 fights ago, and I don't know what to pick. But I think skill for skill, Gary Antoine Russell has more skills, but he's very inactive, and I value activity. And Valenzuela now has the momentum coming into this fight. I don't know how to pick this one.
Yeah, bro. The Russell School of Boxing, fight once every 2 years and hope people still care.
Tellez taking on Julian Williams. I'm going to shock the world once again. I think Julian beats Tellez.
I'm not remembering who Tellez is.
He has fought on a few cards. Most notably, he knocked out Sergio Garcia on the Spence Crawford fight card. He's just been a guy he last fought on the Tim Tszyu card.
Yeah, I'm remembering him now. That's right.
Johan Gonzalez. It's just he's having trouble standing out as a prospect. He's kind of falling into the background.
He's good, though. He's got a good skill set. He's definitely got a good skill set. You know, I don't know what J-Rock has left in the tank. That's not me doing he doesn't have anything left. I literally just don't know. I haven't seen him fight in so long. So it would feel like things would be in Tellez's favor.
Yeah. Also, Jarrett Hurd is on the undercard. He will be taking on Johan Gonzalez. How do you set that fight up? Because I think that's a real 50-50 fight at this point.
I don't think it's a 50-50. Johan Gonzalez, when he has stepped up in class, has gotten beat up pretty good. Now, it was at a higher level than where Jarrett Hurd is at right now, but I think that Jarrett will win a decision handily.
Okay, because I think that's 50-50, and I honestly, all things being equal, I think I might favor Johan Gonzalez on this fight. I think
I just see him as too much of a punching bag, bro. He's kind of just there to get hit around a bit. And I know he gets knockouts when he fights in Colombia and Venezuela and wherever else he fights, but I just don't see it with that guy.
Okay, on Monday night, Junto Nakatani fights, and also, let's see, who else is on that?
Tsutsumi, right? Say it, Tsutsumi.
Tsutsumi. So, what do you think of that card?
I don't know who either of them are fighting, so unfortunately, I don't know much. But I love getting to see Nakatani, and I think Tsutsumi is becoming one of the stars of Japan right now.
Well, Tsutsumi is taking on Diego Higa, who was originally supposed to be a star, and that's a great fight. I don't know much about David Cuellar, who's fighting Nakatani, but Nakatani is someone that you should just watch just because he's really good.
Yeah, those are two superstars, I think.
Okay, and then we have also Eduardo Rocky Hernandez on Friday taking on Rene Tellez Giron. What are your thoughts on that DAZN bout?
Say the matchup one more time.
Rocky Hernandez versus Rene Tellez Giron.
Rocky Hernandez. Oh, that's the guy that fought Shock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good fight. Giron, I can't remember. He's upset some guys. I know he's kind of an awkward guy, tricky, but it seems like Hernandez is a legit contender type of guy that maybe could win a belt at some point. So I would lean Hernandez on that one, but that's a fun matchup.
And the final one we're going to preview is Lewis Crocker versus my guy, Patty Donovan. What are your thoughts on that fight?
I got to lean Donovan. I just think I've been very impressed with him, but that's a great UK fight right there, bro. And the more of those type of matchups I watch, the more I realize that their significance, because when you can come out of that testing ground of that European and UK fight circuit, those guys do become the Kell Brooks and the Carl Framptons and the world-class guys that come from there. They're not all that level, but when you come out of that, ultimately you are a world-class guy. Okay,
that's the show. Dakota, where can people support you?
You can always support me at the Lukey Boxing Show, at ITR Boxing, and at the Slip and Weave Podcast. Just did a really good double episode with Rihanna Rios and Justin Paul, though, who gave me interviews in pretty close succession, and I just didn't want to split it into 2 episodes. So check that out. They're both really promising fighters that I think are going to have big years.
And we did it. We did it in under an hour. So take care, guys, and we'll be back soon.
Keeping that pace, baby.